Hi again. Kenneth Scott, Latourette, A History of Christianity. We're now on page 300. The subhead is The Revival of the Byzantine Church and Renewed Strains in Relations with Rome. As we have suggested, recovery to Christianity from the disasters which accompanied the disintegration of the Roman Empire began in the eastern branch of the Catholic Church in the 9th century. It was well underway by 950. When the decisive upswing in the western branch of the Catholic Church was about to become noticeable. The revival in the Byzantine Church was associated with the period which was spanned by the Macedonian dynasty from 867 to 1056, a period of about 2 centuries. The iconoclastic controversy, which had so long wrought internal turmoil in the Church, was ended, and external foes were less of a menace than they had been or were to be later. The capital of the Caliphate had been moved from Damascus to Baghdad, so that the threat from the Arabs to Asia Minor was not as acute as formerly. On the eastern border, Armenia, a professedly Christian state, was under strong rulers and was having its golden age. To be sure, external dangers had not passed, for in 904, the second city of the empire, Salonika, that's the former Thessalonica, by the way, of the New Testament, was sacked by Muslims, that is, Muslim corsairs from Crete. And in 910, a Byzantine expedition against Crete was defeated, and in the forepart of the 10th century, Bulgaria, a near rival, had its great day. But as we are to see, the height of Bulgarian power was under a Christian ruler, and was evidence of the triumph of Christianity in that realm. In the second half of the 10th and the first half of the 11th century, Byzantine power attained its highest point since the beginning of the Arab conquests, that is, in the last 400 years. The Church shared in the prosperity. In the first half of the 10th century, that is, the last 50 years of the period with which we are here dealing, before the rise of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, the Byzantine Empire was the strongest state in Europe. However, neither it nor that German state, which bore the Roman name, was nearly as wealthy or as extensive as the Roman Empire had been in its prime, and in territory and population both were very minor powers as compared with China, united as that great land was by the Sung dynasty, which came into being in 960. The resurgence of the Byzantine realm and church was accompanied by renewed strains between the eastern and western wings of the Catholic Church. An outstanding figure in the vigorous life of the Byzantine Church in the second half of the 9th century, and one who became a storm center in the relations between the eastern and western wings of the Catholic Church, was Photius. Photius came from an eminent Byzantine family of ancient Greek stock and was related to emperors. During the iconoclastic controversy, his father had suffered persecution because of his loyalty to the icons. His uncle, Tarasius, had been the patriarch who presided at the Council of Nicaea in 787. Photius was a distinguished scholar, the center of the intellectual renaissance, which was one of the features of the revival in Byzantine life. In his house, the intelligentsia gathered for the reading and discussion of ancient and recent Greek literature, pagan and Christian. He was a favorite at court, and a civil official, was president of the imperial chancellery when, in 858, he was made Patriarch of Constantinople in succession to Ignatius, who had resigned. Like Tarasius, therefore, he came to the post from civil office. Ignatius, the son of an emperor and made a eunuch in his youth by political enemies, had been brought to power in the midst of bitter division in the church by Theodora, whose part in the restoration of the icons we have already noted. Ignatius was almost immediately a center of controversy. Honest and zealous, revered by later generations as a saint, he seems to have proved tactless and not to have been very worldly wise. Certainly he alienated many and was regarded by the intellectuals as both ignorant and contemptuous of Greek philosophy. Soon after being made patriarch, he committed, perhaps out of ignorance, the serious faux pas of sending a pallium to the Pope, implying that he had the right to invest the latter with the symbol of his office. The Pope, quite understandably, replied that he gave the pallium to bishops but did not receive it from others. In the controversies between Ignatius and his opponents, appeal was made to Rome by both parties, for in theory the Latin and the Greek Church were both in the Catholic Church, and the Pope was recognized as having great, even if not supreme, authority. Among others, Ignatius had as antagonist the young emperor Michael III, and the latter's uncle and most influential minister, Bardas, the successful rival of Theodora for the control of that pleasure-loving monarch. Ignatius publicly refused the communion to Bardas, alleging, perhaps on insufficient ground, that the latter was guilty of incest. Bardas had Ignatius deported to a convenient island, and the latter abdicated and urged his friends to join in electing a new patriarch. Photius seems to have been chosen because he was acceptable both to the opponents and to the friends of Ignatius. He was regularly elected by a synod of bishops called for that purpose. A layman, he was hurried through all the degrees of the priesthood in 1 week. This was contrary to canon law, but for it there was such precedent. I should say, for it there was much precedent in bishops from both the friends and opponents of Ignatius joined in consecrating the new patriarch. His elevation seemed to have brought peace to the church. The concord had lasted only a few weeks when the conflict between the parties in the church broke out more furiously than ever. Some of the prelates revolted against Photius, Bardas, and Michael III, and insisted on the restoration of Ignatius. They were replaced by men who were friendly to Photius, but the vast majority of the monks would not recognize the latter's authority. The monastery of Photius, so active in advocacy of the icons, led in the opposition. In 861, a synod was held in Constantinople, at which papal legates were present, instructed by their master to investigate. Here Ignatius appeared, denied that he had appealed to Rome, and challenged the competence of the Roman representatives. The latter ratified the deposition of Ignatius. The action of Rome was based on the claim that, as recognized by a much earlier council at Sardica, the Pope had the right to retry a case against any bishop. The synod also passed acts designed to control some of the abuses in the monasteries, and thus confirmed the enmity of many monks against Photius and his supporters. Building up here to the great division of the church in the 11th century. Put in a link to Jacques Ellul, who had written about the earlier great divide in Christian history, the period of Constantine. Has Christianity been paganized and perverted? First of several videos linked together, so this is the first on your screen.